Hello everyone, my name is Florence Ajala. Welcome to my YouTube channel where we'll be discussing about early years education. First and foremost, I would like to give a big introduction about myself. I came into Ireland in 2005 and have been in early childhood care and education. At the moment, I am a doctoral researcher at Mary Immaculate College, Limerick, where I'm looking at participation in early years. Okay, so feel free to subscribe to my channel where we'll be discussing about early years. Okay, so you're welcome to join my channel. Okay, so today this is my first time on YouTube. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about early years education. Okay, using the Irish perspective, from the Irish perspective. So here in Ireland, we talk about early childhood care and education from birth to 6 years, okay, where children go to either creche, a preschool, or daycare center when parents go to work or parents are studying, where early years practitioners looked after the children. Okay, so and according to research, we're being told that from birth to 6 years a lot of things happened. Okay, and the kind of education that takes place from birth to 6 years, it goes a long way throughout the lifespan of the child. Okay, so it's very important as parents, guidance. If we have children from birth to 6 years, we really need to look at their holistic development. And what do I mean by holistic development? I'm talking about the whole perspective of the child. And what do I mean by the whole perspective of the child? I'm talking about looking at the physical development of the child, and physical development is being broken down into two, where we talk about the fine motor skills and gross motor skills. And what do I mean by fine motor skills? Fine motor skills is the ability of the child to be able to pick little things, and then the gross motor skills is about the child using their whole body. So from birth to 6 years, let's look at the physical development of the child. Okay, so and we're looking at in terms of promoting their fine and gross motor skills. So as practitioners, as parents, as guidance, so we need to kind of like help children to develop around the physical development in terms of like getting the children to use their fine and gross motor skills. And when we talk about fine motor skills, how can we promote the fine motor skills in the child? We're talking about, for example, maybe giving the child a pencil and a piece of paper to draw on. We're talking about coloring, anything that has to do with the child picking up things on the floor, maybe picking up colors, picking up ball. So getting the child to be able to use their fine motor skills. And it starts from about 6 months, when the child is able to sit down, when the child is able to pick up things. So we encourage the child to pick up things. And I'm going to say to you now, when children are really small, you have to be mindful of the things that you put on the floor or you display around. Because when children are being small, anything just goes into their mouth. Okay, they put anything into their mouth. So you just have to mindful of the safety of the child in terms of like make sure the whole environment is clean for the child, make sure there's nothing the child will be able to pick, because anything the child picks goes straight into their mouth. Okay, so that's the aspect of the fine motor skills, getting the child to be able to use their hands to pick up little things, pick up crayons, pick up pencils, drawing. And when we talk about gross motor skills, the child being able to use their whole body, we're talking about the child kicking the ball, running around. So as parents, as practitioners, okay, as guidance, we can promote the fine and gross motor skills of the child using little materials. We don't need to kind of like go out of our way, to spend a lot. Simple thing as picking up a ball, a ball. Okay, you can engage the child with the ball as well, like kicking up the ball, throwing up the ball, like coloring, getting the child to color and all that. And then the next one is talking about I've talked about the physical development of the child and how you can promote that. So we're talking about the intellectual development. So that has to be with cognitive, that has to be with what goes into the mind of the child, the brain of the child. Okay, so in terms of like cognitive development, how can you promote the cognitive development of the child? By asking questions, prompting curiosity in the child, asking questions like, oh Johnny, how was your day today? Hope everything was fine. Did you finish your dinner? Getting the child to talk. And as parents, as practitioners as well, and as like as guidance, as children are growing up, when they begin to talk, we need to, we need to engage them in conversation. Don't say, oh, the child is too small. Even according to research, when the children are in the in when they're during the stage of pregnancy, that's the time we're supposed to engage in conversation with the child, like reading stories to the child. And the research has said that when you read to a child, when they're not being born yet, when the child grows up, they develop a reading skill. So, curiosity in the child in terms of like intellectual development, asking the child's question, getting the child to come around you and ask you questions as well. So we've talked about the physical development, intellectual development, and then we talk about the language development. How can you promote the language development in the child? In terms of language, getting books, reading with the child according to the age of the child. Okay, so one thing I'm going to say to you is, like, if you have a 1-year-old child, you can't read a book of 3 or 4-year-old to the child. It's of no use to the child, it's of no benefit to the child. So you need to pick up a book, and I'm going to give you tips about picking up books. When you go into the library or when you go into the bookstore, you need to check, okay, make sure it's age appropriate. Okay, so make sure the book that you pick up for the child is age appropriate for the child, and then you sit down, you read it word for word. There's no need to rush. Take your time with the child, okay? If it means there's a lot that you can do when you read story with a child. There's a lot going on, okay? You can, a page, you can spend about 10 minutes getting the curiosity out of the child, asking the picture, what does that picture looks like? What does the book looks like? The texture of the book, okay? When you even feel the texture of the book, okay, it goes a long way. You open the child as well in terms of their fine motor skills as well. Okay, so reading books with the child, you can help to promote the language of the child. Talking about pictures in your environment, okay, talking about your environment. Maybe you go to the park with the child, you talk to the child. What can you see? Identify what you can see on around you, and that will engage the child, okay, in discussion as well. Okay, so we're talking about next is emotional development. Okay, so in terms of like emotional development of the child, her ability to meet the emotional needs of the child. For example, if you have a child crying, how are you able to soothe the child? Maybe there's a child that's been dropped into the crash, okay, so, and the parent had to go to work. Maybe the mom dropped the child. You just have to stop the child and say to, oh, come on, Johnny, your mom will be back in a while. Divert the attention of the child to something else. So if Johnny likes to do coloring, you can just say to Johnny, oh, Johnny, why don't you go over to the, to the home corner area and we do coloring? You're diverting that child attention, and then you're able to meet the emotional needs of the child. So I've talked about a physical, intellectual, language, emotional. So the social aspect, we're talking about social development of the child. Okay, so how can you promote the social development of the child? You can promote the social development of the child by, playing with the child. Let the child play with their peers, engaging discussions with children, getting them to play, bring them out, singing songs, gathering children together, reading stories. By so doing, you can promote the social development of the child. So I've talked about the physical, intellectual, the language, emotional, and the social. And then the last one, which most people don't talk about, is the cultural aspect of the child. We're talking about holistic development. Holistic development is looking at the wholeness of the child. So the cultural aspect of the child, okay, if you're looking, we're in the 21st century now at the moment, and you can see, for example, for people living abroad, you can see that maybe some children are not part of that culture. Okay, let's say, for instance, we have an African child, maybe an African child in an Irish crash. Okay, so you have to integrate the cultural aspect of the child. Let's say, for example, you have a child from a Nigerian background community, and they speak Yoruba. Okay, so then you can have a language that say, a language that relates to the Yoruba in your setting. Maybe a cabo is welcome. Okay, so you can display that in your setting. That shows you're kind of like incorporating the cultural aspects of the child. You have children that are from French background, you can have bonjour on the wall, Irish as well, dear greet, so that you're kind of like taking the honest aspect of the child. Okay, so it's very important in terms of looking at the holistic approach of the child. When I talk about holistic, it's looking at the child, the wholeness of the child. So in terms of physical, intellectual, language, emotional, social, and cultural development of the child. Okay, so I'm going to say a big thank you for watching my YouTube. So feel free to subscribe, and I'll come back next week again with an interesting topic. Okay, so if you have any question, hit the question button, you ask me question, and then I'll be able to to answer you. Thanks for joining, and thanks for watching. Bye.